one of the best things that anyone can ever do in their life is to realize that other people's opinions of you are none of your business. Almost all the time when someone says something about you, it's some kind of projection or it's something they're seeing in themselves.
Welcome to the Unschooling Lifestyle, the podcast that challenges conventional education and invites families to redefine success on their own terms. If you're ready to break free from outdated systems and embrace a life of curiosity, connection, and true freedom, this is your space. Join us as we explore real stories, practical insights, and inspiring conversations that empower you to trust your instincts, partner with your children, and take the path of least resistance toward the life you've always dreamed of. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Unschooling Lifestyle. We have Sophie Dubus with us, and we're having a conversation about her story and how human design came to her life and what she's doing with human design around parenting and raising a person that's authentic to themselves. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Let's start with what is your type first, and if you would like to share about your son's type, and then how did human design came into your life?
Sure. So I have quite a rare design. I'm a 4/6 ego manifestor on the right angle cross attention 2. And when I first found out about human design, I was kind of told that I had quite an intense design. So yeah, it's one of the rarer ones. And I think for me, when I found out, it was a little bit trickier to kind of get information on that.
Okay.
My son, who is 3 years, 8 months, is a 3/5 emotional manifesting generator, and he has 7 defined centers. So that gives you a little bit of an idea. I have 4 defined centers. He has 7. So it gives you a little bit of an idea about the energy dynamics between the two of us. And he
I
has
got goosebumps as you said it.
Yeah, he's got all 4 motor centers defined, so a lot of energy.
That is so interesting. So how does human design comes into your life? When do you find it?
So when I was midway through my Saturn return, so in 2011, it sounds very cliched, but I was traveling in India and I literally bumped into this guy, this American man, who I was like, he seems familiar in a way, but I was a bit kind of like, I was rushing somewhere and he was like, I want to guess your star sign. And I was like skeptical, like, what do you want?
Of course.
And he guessed Pisces. And I was like, no, you're wrong. He's like, but you're a water sign, aren't you? And I was like, yes, I'm a Cancer. Anyway, that was kind of the basis of our conversation. And then I got back to the guest house where I was staying with my friend and I noticed this poster on the wall. And I was like, hang on, that looks like the guy that I saw earlier. Like, what does he do? So I was reading the poster and he did something called Astro NLP, and then it said human design. And I was intrigued because I was at that point in my life, in my Saturn return where I'd been doing a lot of soul searching, trying to find out who I was. I was 29. I'd actually just come from a past life regression session with somebody when I bumped into this guy. And anyway, I looked up his name and then I realized I'd seen him maybe a decade earlier on a TV show.
What?
And I just felt like there was kind of some, some coincidences there, some synchronicity. So I booked a session with him. Didn't really have any idea what it was going to be. And it was really interesting. But as I said at the beginning, because when he kind of gave me the information about my design, and this is where I think people have to be really aware when they're like giving human design readings as well, because it can either like put someone off or make somebody feel like they want to go further, like they can be really kind of repelled by it, or they can be empowered. And having a really rare design, like I said, like an ego manifestor, ego authority is only like, I think like 2% of the population. He basically told me throughout this that he gave me some role models of manifestors were including Hitler.
Okay.
Not Maya Angelou or anything, but like Hitler and Mao Zedong and Stalin. And so said, you're an ego manifestor. You're just here to do what you want. So just be the bitch that you are. And it was very firmly in my people-pleasing era then.
Okay.
It was kind of like, I was like, I just want people to like me. And so when I received this reading, I was like, well, I'm screwed, because it wasn't particularly empowering when I received it. So I shelved it for a couple of years. And then literally, I think it was 4 years later, the CD recording, because remember this was in 2011, didn't have so much like technology now. The CD recording literally fell into my lap and I was like, okay, I need to revisit this and pick this up again. So I did.
Okay. And then you just started from there?
Yeah, I started with it, just dipping into it a little bit. When we hear human design as an adult, there's some things that feel like, yes, that's me. And then there's some things, obviously, that are probably uncomfortable because of conditioning that we have. And so it took me a little while to kind of, feel into it. But I started just doing my own research. And then I got a couple more readings from different people. some good, some not so good. And then I started incorporating, I'd become a hypnotherapist during this time, and I started incorporating it into my hypnotherapy practice, thinking, well, if most people's problems, like 9 times out of 10, the problems that adults are presenting with are things that are, rooted in their childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can look at this map of who they really are, then it's going to help me probably to fast track their hypnotherapy. And it did, really surprisingly. So I was kind of using it in the background and not so much talking about it. Obviously, I was getting consent from my clients to use it, but I wasn't kind of doing readings. I wasn't explaining it. I was just using it in a therapeutic way. And then I think it was just before COVID, actually. I started to kind of go into a little bit more and learning a bit more and then talking about it more. And then people started asking for readings and I started doing those and absolutely loved doing it. So yeah, I've really been doing it for almost 6 years.
Wow. I absolutely love that. I just finished a book, Many Lives, Many Masters, about, the hypnotherapy. Whenever I start something, I take it back to the root or to the beginning. So going through the book about the many lives that this person lived or how they shared the information, I was just blown away by it all. You get consent, you get the charge, and then how do you incorporate it?
So that was actually the first book that got me really interested in past life regression. I love that. And I went to one of his seminars when I was living in Australia at the time. Absolutely fantastic. Dr. Brian Weiss. That book is amazing. That book really changed my life. It just blew me away.
Oh my goodness, look, I have all kinds of goosebumps here.
So past life regression is one form of hypnotherapy. It's regression therapy. So regression therapy is when we go back. So either, a few years or into childhood, or in case of what you're talking about, many lives, many masters, is going back into past lives. You don't do that in every hypnotherapy session, but I will often regress somebody in this present life, maybe into their childhood in a hypnotherapy session.
Mm-hmm.
So it would depend if it would come up, and it would depend what kind of session I'm doing, whether I've talked to them about hypnotherapy and whether I tend to, say anything about their human design. But there's somewhere we can tell basically by looking at somebody's chart. Where are their strengths? Where are their vulnerabilities? So where they're defined is where they have consistent energy. Where they're undefined or open tends to be where we're more conditioned. It does depend on numerous other things as well. And we can have conditioning in our defined centers. But it gives you this sort of really clear map of who somebody is when they don't have all of that fog, all of that veil of conditioning. So I'm able to see where, somebody might have more of a tendency to pick up emotional patterns, or somebody might have a tendency to pick up things around burnout, based on their human design chart. And then there's many deeper layers that I go into as well, looking at, for example, there's aspects you can see where they're going to somaticize stress. They're going to have stress in their body more by looking at particular gates and planets and lines. There's aspects you can see where somebody is going to, have basically where they need to grow. So where they need to go through and mature, relational patterns. There's all these different things that you can pinpoint with the human design chart. So really depending on what somebody's issue is, if people come with addiction issues, there's gates there which kind of are prevalent with addiction issues. So I can see if they have those. And it just really helps me to personalize their therapy even more.
My goodness, I love that so much, though. And for you as a manifestor, you say you were in your people pleasing era for when you found when you found it. How do you begin the deconditioning process to make a healthy relationship with the anger aspect of the not self and kind of just find that balance?
So I tended to find as we've all got a core wound, really, depending on our type. I mean, each type carries a core wound, and then there's obviously other things that can come up as well. But manifestors tend to carry a core wound of feeling alone because they're misunderstood, or feeling controlled. And I tend to find with manifestors, I'm in a lot of manifestor groups, on Facebook and things, manifestors will tend to go one of two ways. They'll either shrink and they'll just kind of, they pretend not to be seen, and they shrink themselves. Developing throat problems is quite common, both for myself and with other manifestors, because we're subduing our voice. Obviously, a manifestor always has a defined throat as part of their design, but having throat problems or thyroid problems, I found, is quite common with manifestors. Or they either shrink or they rebel. So it's really kind of one of those two polarities. For me, I shrunk. I went into that people pleasing. I was I don't want to be seen, and kind of hiding away. So one of the things that helped me the most in terms of deconditioning was also just being around other manifestors.
Okay.
Whether that's in person or whether just through communicating with other people, and having that kind of shared experience, and kind of being in that space where then I felt seen, like other people are going through similar things, when you feel that sense of relief when you connect with someone and you're like, oh, you've been carrying something yourself, and then it's kind of like, oh, it wasn't me, like there's nothing wrong with me, and you feel
Mm-hmm.
accepted. That's been a big part of it.
To know that you're not alone and that you're not the only person feeling this way. I mean, for me as a manifesting generator, I remember having tears when I realized about the multi-passionate aspect of it, because I had been almost shamed for having so many passions, for having so many projects. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm supposed to be this way. And now when I shifted that to embrace that aspect of myself, I'm like, okay, this makes so much more sense, and he feels so much more authentic, and it was just a huge relief.
I think that's the thing. I think for many people, the feedback I get quite frequently is that it's like confirming, and it feels like
Yes.
someone's permission to be who they are. And that's really one of the reasons I love using it in parenting as well, because it's like, wouldn't it be great if we felt that from when we were kids all the way through our childhood, right? And then we don't have to do all this therapy later on in life.
Something that really caught my eye on your website was the writing about when something goes well into our life, we kind of try to pass that on to our children. Same thing when we're lacking something in childhood and we realize that later on in adulthood, we try to give that to our children. I feel like that was a little bit my experience. My mom's a projector, but she definitely did everything that she didn't get. And I was the oldest one. I grew up in Mexico too. So there was just a few pieces there of like cultural expectations and experiences and whatnot. But I felt like I was fulfilling the things and activities that she didn't have, that she wished she would have had, and they had nothing to do with me. Can you share a little bit of how you go through that with parents, and how do you help them kind of see those patterns to free themselves from those experiences?
Yeah. So the way that I talk about it is, you parent from your own experience, right? You either,
Mm-hmm.
I think when you become a parent, you reflect on your own childhood more, and you're kind of like, okay, I had this and this was great, or I had this and it wasn't so great, and I didn't have this and I wish I had. And so that's just naturally, we parent from our own experience, our own filter of the world. Now, obviously, through human design, you can see how you and your child or children are very, very different, and they might need different things. One example, for example, for me, I and my brothers are projectors, so we both needed more rest. I've got a manifesting generator child with 7 defined centers. I know he's going to need a lot more kind of energy and things like that. He's also a quad left, so completely different from me. One of the ones that that comes to mind was I had a client and I was on a call with her, and she had two sons. I think they were about 18 months or 2 years apart, and they were still quite young at the time when we were talking. And they were just butting heads all the time, which is natural for young kids. But, the older one, I think it was maybe 4, and he was just really saying, like, I don't like my brother and I want the garbage man to take him away. And she was just kind of feeling as the mother, like, how do I make them get along? Like, what do I do? Like, what am I doing wrong? And, she was kind of like, filled with all of this mum guilt and everything. And I said to her, I looked at their charts and I pointed some things out to her. And I said, look, they might not get along, and that's okay. It's not your fault. You're not doing anything wrong. They've got this aspect and this aspect. And I think the thing about human design is because it's so visual, you can actually see something and I can point something out. And people don't need to know exactly what all of the numbers mean, but I can say, there's this and there's this. And this means this and this means this. And because these things are kind of opposing or conflicting, there might just be this natural tension in their relationship. It doesn't mean that they can't have a relationship, but it might not be the relationship you are expecting or envisaging. And that doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong as a mother. Now, it transpired she's an only child. She always wanted a sibling. So she, from her own, what she didn't have, right? She wanted a sibling that she got on with, that she was best friends with. So that's what she was projecting unconsciously onto her sons, and that wasn't happening. And then it was kind of going back.
Oh my God, that's such a beautiful story. And how validating for her to let go of her vision of what having a sibling could have been, because she didn't actually have one. So she created this whole experience in her mind and she wanted to pass it on to her children, and they weren't designed that way. Oh my goodness.
They're like chalk and cheese. And I think, I mean, she said to me it was relief, because I
Yes.
was like, there's nothing you can do. It's not your fault. Here are some things that you can kind of like damage control when things happen. And, this is what this kid needs in times of stress. And this is what this kid needs. Sometimes they'll get on and sometimes they won't, but you can't force this bond or connection that's not there.
That is like years of guilt taken off of her back. I feel like that would give you back your life. Yes. I
Yeah.
mean, the weight lifted from your shoulders. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Uh,
Stuff I love because it was just like, it's kind of like almost like she's like, oh, I can finally let go and like I'm not
yes.
doing anything wrong. Because I think that's the biggest thing sometimes for us as parents is like, especially in this era where we recognize not everything went great with the last generation. We're trying so hard to do everything well. Obviously, we're not going to get it perfect, but we're
Exactly.
trying to. I love, the philosophy of conscious parenting, but it's missing the mark because it's still generic. And when you understand, you're like, well, why isn't my child? Look, this person on Instagram is doing this. Why isn't my child doing that? Because they're not designed that same way. Everything has to be
Exactly.
personalized.
That is just so wonderful. So when you had your son, did you like went into his design right away? Like you found out about his design, his defined centers and all of that, or
I knew vaguely what it was going to be when I was pregnant because it was very intentional for me to have my son. Yeah, I knew he was going to be a manifesting generator because there was a nodal transit on the 3420, or like
okay.
that last kind of 18 months. So I knew that he was going to be a manifesting generator, and I was like, oh, it's myself. And I'd been looking, a few, obviously due dates are kind of, whatever, but
Yes.
I'd been around the due dates and stuff. So I kind of had an idea. And he's born exactly 3 months after my birthday. So
Okay.
he's the same incarnation cross as me, but a different version of it. So I love that we share that. So basically, like as soon as he was born, or after I'd kind of recovered, I looked up his design, and he's a 3-5, which is I find adults who were three. I feel like this is a real gift actually because it's very different to me being a 4-6. Um, I tend to find 3-5s as adults when I speak to them tend to have quite heavy conditioning,
Mm,
because they've been made to be wrong as third lines when they just need to kind of know, oh, it's cool, you can just try again. Like third lines really need to have this sense of lightheartedness and like, oh, that didn't work. That's cool. I'll just try again. So I've been able to, speak to him like that from the beginning and not make him wrong and not tell him he's doing things wrong. If he gets upset, something doesn't work, I'm like, that's cool. We can just try again. It's all right. There's loads of ways to do things. And, so I'm really blessed because, 3-5s just experience so much conditioning. It's so misunderstood.
yeah. So much pressure to get everything right from the very beginning and to feel like you have to. Otherwise, there's just no other road. Do you go into the variables?
Totally. The variables are one of the, like, I actually did an entire study, like, I did an entire training in variables as well. So it's one of the areas that
Mm-hmm.
it's so important. And I think, it can be overlooked and it's absolutely essential for children. So for young children, the determination, also known as the digestion, is essential because that's how they take things in. So how they take food in, how they take information in, so how they learn, how they take food in, their environment. Rara always says the environment doesn't really come into play until after your first Saturn return, so around about the age of 30. However, I do notice it a lot, and I do notice it's really important. Both myself and my son have Kay's environment, and it's very obvious in terms of what he wants, how he feels safe, etc. So I definitely go into the variables. Also, in terms of learning, I go into the perspective and motivation as well, because they're very important. I go into the directions of the variables, whether they're facing to the left or the right, because that's a key part of it as well. So my son, like I said, he's a quad left. I'm a try right. So I have my determination, my environment, and my motivation pointing to the right, not only my perspective to the left. So I knew this from, obviously when I was weaning him as well. I don't have much of an appetite as well. Like I can just go sometimes I'll go to like 4 p.m. and I'll be like, oh, I haven't eaten anything yet. And I'm okay. But a child or a person with the determination, so the top left arrow facing to the left, if they don't have regular nourishment, like it's not good for you to fast, to be honest. Like if they don't have regular nourishment, it can actually negatively affect the brain. So, with a child who's got the determination arrow facing to the left, they need to be constantly digesting, whether it's food, whether it's playing, whether they're learning something, their brain is always active. So if you make that child wait for meals, like, no, we have 3 meals a day and you're very regimented and, breakfast is here, lunch is here, dinner is here. No, you absolutely cannot have a snack before then. That can actually really negatively affect them. So I was constantly offering my child, food, snacks, and things like that, and seeing what he responded to, because I was really acutely aware I don't necessarily eat that much and I don't eat that frequently, but he's very different. He needs regular nourishment. So that was something that was kind of very present for me.
Yes, I could totally relate though. I need to have nourishment like all the time. There has to be something happening and it's so valuable to hear that because I've been at parks before and I've heard parents say you won't have a snack because if you eat right now, you won't eat dinner. And I'm like, why would you deny that?
Very much conditioning around food, though, and I wasn't aware how much conditioning we had around food. And obviously, it's different in different cultures, but generally as a
Yes.
society, until I had a child, and I'm like, oh my God, like the comments just all the time. They're eating too much. They're not eating enough. They should eat that. They shouldn't eat that. And I really believe, like above anything else as well, is that we should be raising our kids so they can understand themselves. They can listen to their body. They can listen to their intuition. Yes, still have rules and boundaries. So, no, you're not having a second bowl of ice cream. Like one is enough. Educate them on what's healthy and things. But yeah, my son will eat his dinner if he has a snack.
The connection with my body was something that I really needed to get back into because I felt that my soul, like they were all different pieces and they weren't really working together. Like what the soul was saying something, but the body was like, girl, this isn't matching. Like we have to do something. And nowadays, that's what I love concentrating on to make sure that the kiddos have a deep connection with the body because the body will tell you what it needs if we are just ready to listen.
Exactly.
How do parents find you and how do you come in to help the parents? Is it parents that, have been in this parenthood journey for a couple of years and they're struggling, or what are people drawn to you for?
I think a lot of it's word of mouth. Some people that have never heard of it, like I did a family dynamics reading, like for a whole family of 4 recently, because it was word of mouth. She had 0 illness, but she's like, my friend told me you could help me. Here's what I'm struggling with. And I said, okay, yeah, I can help you with that. This is the system I use. And she was a bit kind of like, because she's quite like practical and scientific, but she was like,
Yes.
okay, so I'm open to it. And then she got really, she's a 4-1 or a 1-4. She's definitely got a 1 in there. And then she was kind of like, well, I want to learn more about it. And I was like, of course you do. Of course you're taking notes. You're a 1
Of
line.
course you do that once.
And
That
there were
one's
so many things
talking.
that I was going through and I was explaining things. She's like, yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And the way that I work with anyone, whether it's parents or whoever it is, I don't just kind of go, here's stuff about your chart, because anyone can find that out online. Like that's like
Hmm.
with it. Like I really kind of bridge it so people have, practical guidance. So for example, this mother came to me and she's like, these are the family dynamic issues, between her and her husband, between her and one of her children, between 2 children together, etc. So I'm like, okay, I take the issues, I go away and look at the charts, and then we hop on a call together, usually if I'm doing a 1-to-1, and we kind of go through and I look at the chart, and depending on their level of knowledge will depend on whether I use human design language or not, or I just completely
Yes.
translate it to something that is understandable. But I always give them things that they can do. I give them practical tips that they can go and experiment with beyond just like tune in, follow your strategy and authority
Yes.
based on dynamics in the chart. Try this, try this.
Oh my goodness. Yes, because that is the practicality of it all is exactly what kind of got me through the harder times during my unschooling journey and like trying to cope with that philosophy of like self-directed learning and holding space for my child. I'm like, how am I supposed to do that if I never really had that? So I had to kind of go back into it. So I did a lot of work on myself and on my past and on my child in my childhood in order to be able to like bridge the gap for that. So for you as a manifester, what kind of words of wisdom do you have for manifestor parents and for parents who have a manifestor child?
For every parent, as you just said, it's when I kind of pivoted into more parenting for human design, because I've done just general human design and done human design. I was a coach in a business marketing container for a while. Then when I pivoted into really focusing on parenting after I had my son, because I was like, well, of course that's gonna, that's where I can help people. Everybody, it's hardly ever the child. It's almost always the parents and our beliefs and our conditioning in something, or our expectations. If your children are still very young, you can kind of, get an understanding of their design. And there's not a lot you need to do. You just kind of let them be once you understand their design. What's going to be difficult is for you allowing them to be a certain way because it's not like your design. So for me, as a 4-6, my son's a 3-5, and I have to bite my tongue when I'm like, I've told you not to do that and you're going to do it anyway because I have to let you because you're a deadline. I was just like, okay, darling, yes, let's just do that, even though I know it's not going to work. So it's the uncomfortableness that arises in us for whatever reason, either because it's something where there's dissonance in our human design, like, in the profile, for example, or something that we weren't allowed to do. So most of the work is on reparenting ourselves. So like I said, for manifestors, our core wound tends to be, so as adults, tends to be feeling like misunderstood, shut out because people can't understand us because of our aura, feeling controlled. So manifestors don't want to be controlled. So there's things to work through that as a parent. Because manifestors really don't want to be interrupted, it can be very challenging when you've got young children, regardless of what design they are, because they do constantly respond. And that's constantly pulling you into conditioning that you probably have of being a generator. Yeah. And so you're constantly being called to respond. So you can feel, or, speaking from my experience, you can feel sometimes you're like, I just need a minute alone, and again, I'm sure every kind of parent can feel that, but it's particularly prevalent for manifestors because if we're in creative flow, we don't want to be interrupted. So having alone time is key. Having time carved out where you can, allow that kind of creativity and those urges to flow through, whatever that might be. So whether that's having somebody else to, look after your children, whether that's kind of, depending on the age of your child, going, look, I just need Mama needs half an hour by myself. And, again, I think one of the most important parts of any relationship, whether it's parent-child, romantic or whatever, is communication. And so I've been communicating very clearly with my son, just using adult, just speaking normally, not in baby language, from when he was very young, when he was pre-verbal. So I'm always communicating with him because as a manifestor parent, you also need to inform. You need to inform. You need to be informed as well. And so if you have a manifestor child, again, I would recommend to tell them what's going on, to try not to say no as much as you can. If you do need to say no, tell them why. So no, you can't go and play at your friend's house right now because we're about to eat in 5 minutes. But after we finish eating, you can go. They need freedom. They need to also know that they have power. They need to know that they have impact. So starting to tell them those things from a young age is really important. I didn't know as a child, why I felt like just people didn't like me. I felt like the odd one out. I felt like really misunderstood. So for a manifestor child to know about their aura, when a child is at an age where you can describe to them about, an aura, an energy field, and that, to be honest, I think my son would even understand that now at the age of 3, to let them know, this is how we feel each other, because kids can feel energy. Yes. And you're like a closed book, and people can't read you. They can't see what's in the book. And so you need to tell them about things. You need to tell them what's going to happen so that they're kind of like, okay, because otherwise sometimes they might be not a little bit scared of you, but they just don't know what you're going to do. So when you tell them that, it kind of opens you up a little bit. So things like that, I think, are helpful for kids. And then, if they're a little bit older, if they're in teenage years, you're going to have bumping up against authority, particularly if they're in schools and things like that. I find manifestor children can be kind of vilified in school a little bit, again, because the teachers can't read them. So explaining about the aura and the way the aura works and that it's closed for manifestors, I think is so, so important.
That is beautiful, though. What is your relationship with your family now after you found out that you were a manifestor? How did it change? What are the types of your family, your parents? Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have one sibling. I have one brother, yeah. So
he's a projector, right?
He's a projector, yeah. He's 2 years older than me. So I grew up with both my parents, my brother, and my maternal grandmother. So my maternal grandmother, who passed away when I was 8, but she was actually a manifestor as well. And that, when I reflected on that, a few years ago, I was like, oh, that's why I felt kind of accepted with her and quite comfortable. She lived with us, like a granny annex. I felt at peace with her. I felt like even if we weren't speaking, and I feel like she taught me art and stuff. And we'd spend it in cooking. We were doing things like that together where we weren't necessarily speaking, but I did feel quite peaceful with her. Yeah, my brother and I just butted heads when we were kids, especially when we were teenagers as well. Just because I think it's quite hard for a projector because they're designed to read people. And I think it can be quite frustrating for some projectors that they can't read a manifestor. And they try to. And for a manifestor, it's like, just get out. It's really, projectors are obviously designed to read, to see generators and manifesting generators because of that open aura, and they try it with manifestors and they can't. And it can either be a very beautiful relationship, manifestors and projectors, or it can be very tense. So my brother and I can, again, like a little bit like chalk and cheese sometimes. Both our parents are generators, one emotional, one sacral. I don't have their exact times of birth. Me finding out about human design brought a lot of healing for me.
Yes.
To be able to look at my parents and just be like, okay, well, that's why that happened, and that's why that happened. And they did the best they could with what they had. I believe all of our parents do.
Yes.
So this is the other thing about human design, and I often recommend for my clients to look at your parents' charts too, because even if you don't have a conversation with them about anything, knowing, where they were conditioned and what they had and, what they did and didn't get. And it just, again, seeing how different you are, that can bring a sense of healing as well.
It really does, though. My dad is a quadrite, and he's a manifesting generator, and my mom's a projector. And it brought a lot of healing, a lot of understanding.
Looking at all the different aspects and kind of seeing, again, where you have synergies or where you maybe kind of have conflict.
Yes.
Also, all of my parents and my brother are all left angle, right? And I'm right angle. So they're all 6'2", and I'm a 4'6". So that's very different as well. And that contributed, I think, in part for me feeling a bit like misunderstood. I've also got defined ego center. I'm the only one with a defined ego center. I've got the 2145. I had lots of comments in my childhood about being selfish. So that's another key tip for anyone listening. If you or your child have the 2145, my son has it too. And they say, I want, it's not selfish. It's not selfish. So please don't call a child with a 2145 selfish. That was a big condition.
I hear people saying, my child it's manipulative. I can see it. They're going to be a manipulative person. And I'm like, I don't think a child comes into this world trying to make you do something. They're just being themselves.
We want to fit in, we want to fit in. Want to kind of do what's correct, especially if you're a new parent, you're listening to advice, you don't know what to do, you're looking for things out there. And again, as we were saying earlier, I think this is why it's so important for me to teach my child to understand his body and to listen to his body, and for me to respect that. Because as adults, most of us have really come out of alignment with our body. We don't trust ourselves, we don't trust our intuition, we're constantly asking the advice of other people. And this is the whole point of human design, is to bring you back to yourself, to make you your own authority.
Oh my goodness, yes. And so much to that, though, because we're so conditioned to listen to other people. And I was afraid at the beginning to listen to myself and to realize that what my body, what my soul was calling for was completely against what people were saying that I should have done.
I think when you can treat kids a little bit, not like adults, but like when you give them a bit more respect, and like I tried to let him from a very early age to make his own decisions as much as possible, or to be part of that decision-making process.
Yes.
I mean, sometimes he changes his mind a lot, and it takes a while because he's emotional authority. So that's like another kind of thing. I want to hurry him up sometimes, and I have to like wind myself back in. But it's really important. Like, the same in terms of his, he doesn't go to school. He goes to just a daycare. But like, whether he wants to go, whether he doesn't want to go, I just try to give him as much autonomy as I can, even at a young age.
Do you have any tips for parents who are not manifesting generators, but have children that are manifesting generators? We're very different, you guys. I mean,
this is the biggest thing for me, and it's in terms of energy levels. So anyone who's a manifestor, projector, or reflector who doesn't have a defined sacral center, and especially if you've got even a manifesting generator, right? If you say generator or manifesting generator, there's so much variation. A manifesting generator or a generator can have anywhere between 2 and 9 centers defined. A manifestor could have anywhere between 2 and 8 centers defined. So there's a lot of variation. And this is one of the things, sometimes we have to generalize in terms of type, but we also need to remember that there's so much variation within that. But for me, as a manifestor with 4 centers defined, my only motor center, so one of the centers that gives you energy, is my ego center. My son has 7 centers defined, so a lot of consistent energy, including all 4 centers. So sacral, ego, root, and solar plexus. So all of those.
All 4 of them.
He's only got the head and ajna undefined.
Okay.
So he has a lot of energy, and he's 3, and I'm almost 44. So, we've got to look at all those things too.
Yes.
So I have invented a lot of games where I'm present with him and I'm connected because that's what he wants. But I'm lying down on the floor and like I'm like going, run up and down. Like when I know he needs to burn off energy, like run up and down the room, Or I play things where I'm just kind of like lying down a lot, or I read to him a lot. If I'm really tired and I don't have energy, my son loves being read to, and I will always read to him. So we lie down. I rest, I'm reading to him. That's not taking physical energy from me. If I really need a break, then, again, I'll just be like, look, I need to, now he's a little bit older, make sure he's safe. I'm like, I need to lie down for 10 minutes,
Yes.
Or if I need to resort to a tablet or something, then I'll do that. If that's for my sanity or for my energy, then I'll do that. Sometimes even for me, just going out for a drive or going out for a walk, that can help as well, because I'm not kind of doing something. I'm more just sort of like in flow. I don't necessarily have that kind of like bum, bum, bum energy to burn all the time. And he knows that. I tell him that. And I also tell him that that's not a reflection of him. That's just that we're different.
Yes, I love that so much though, because I have really low emotional waves. To share I don't feel like that because of them or as a result of something that they did. Some of my boundaries now is to literally remove myself from the environment and just sometimes at night just kind of go to sleep and just call it a day early and just be done with it. But for people to know that it's not because of them, even with my partner, to say, whatever I'm going through is not anything that you did or because of you. It's just what it is right now. So it was really, really healing for me, and to try to find the root cause of it. It's just
Let
there.
it be.
It's, yes, it's just,
Yeah.
yes. Oh my
And that's
goodness.
so important because, like, children, especially in the early years, the first 7 years, are very egocentric. So they feel like everything revolves around them. So if you're acting a certain way, they're going to just internalize it and think it's because of something that they've done, So again,
Exactly.
communication is so, so important. Like communicating, like, not you just kind of, and this is especially important if someone's a manifestor, not just kind of leaving the room and kind of like going off. I think it's beneficial, honestly, for all types, but saying, I'm not feeling great, or
Yes.
I just need a bit of time to myself. I'm going to go in the other room. Nothing that anyone's done. It's nothing that you guys have done. And again, just that openness and communication is really key.
Yeah, that communication is definitely key, though. Can we go back to when people say to children, or even for us adults, like, you're selfish? Because I've been told in the past, well, you're really selfish. But I know that if I'm not okay, then my whole environment around my mood or whatever, no one is okay. So, what would you say to people to work through those things?
So I think the way in which we say something, and people have different connotations around language, but generally the word selfish, and it's going to depend also the tone of voice. You're so
Yes.
selfish, or like, wow, you're really selfish. Like there's different ways you can say things, okay? But typically, I'd say most people, if they were told they were selfish, they're going to think that's a negative thing, right? Just
Yes.
because again, cultural conditioning, societal conditioning. But yes, you need to look after yourself first. You need to put yourself first. Now, there are numerous parts in somebody's human design where somebody might be seen as selfish, having the 2145, where typically a person will say, I want this, I want this. It's actually a tribal channel. So it's not that they want the thing necessarily for themselves, it's actually for the tribe. If somebody has a lot of individual circuitry as well, they can be seen as very, very selfish. And again, they're kind of supposed to be. So what's the question? How do you work through that? You mean if
Yeah,
you're
how can
told
you?
you're selfish, or if you perceive your child to be selfish?
Both, actually. Both. So let's just tackle both, Sophie.
So I think if you're told you're selfish, first, with anything that you're told, if it has like a resonance with you, if it hits a nerve or something like that, just pause, allow yourself to feel however you feel, but know that that's just an opinion of the other person. And I'm not saying this is like, oh yeah, like, because a lot of us are conditioned in terms of people pleasing. We care what other people think. One of the best things anyone can ever do in their life is to realize that other people's opinions of you are none of your business. Almost all the time when someone says something about you, it's some kind of projection or it's something they're seeing in themselves. If someone says to you, you're selfish, and if you can get into that inquisitive state of mind, if you can just not take it personally initially, or just kind of catch yourself and kind of ask them why and ask them to go into it. Because when you go deeper into something, we start to unravel it. And actually, maybe that person starts to kind of come up with a deeper understanding of like, well, you're so selfish because you're having a night off. Okay, well, I needed to I want to look after myself. Like, is this
Yes.
really nourishing for me? You get into a deeper conversation. It's nourishing for me to have a night off, because then when I do that and I'm fully rested, I'm able to be a better parent. And then they kind of have this realization. And what might actually turn out is they wish they could have that. And because they don't,
Yes.
they're projecting
Yes.
onto you that you're selfish.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
again, this communication, right? And just getting into a place, basically like non-violent communication. So don't
Yes.
take it personally, kind of detach from it. get curious about it, get curious about what the other person is saying without it making it about you. And then if you perceive your child to be selfish, again, my child is 3. And so I was taught as a child, you have to share. And so obviously now I'm kind of like, but do they? Do they have to share? Like, isn't
Do
that
they
kind of like,
have
And so me and one of my friends, we kind of go through, our kids are the same age. We kind of like, are on the same page and we talk about things, and, we don't tell the kids to share, but then we have to manage the meltdowns when they don't share and kind of go through all those things. So I think if you perceive your child to be selfish, again, pause, stop yourself. And if it's because your child doesn't want to share something, is that because you were forced to share things when you were a child and you didn't want to? And again, now that is coming back, you're seeing your child do something you weren't allowed to do, and that hurts.
Yes.
Or people will think something about me people will think I'm a bad mother if my child isn't sharing. So it's all conditioning. It's all kind of thoughts and things like that.
My goodness, the sharing is a big one too.
And when you watch kids as well, especially, with young kids, they tend to work it out pretty well. Like I watch, like I said, with my friend and her daughter, who's a similar age to my son. It can be really like, wow, like, really kind of emotional. But then it's kind of gone. And you're like, they don't hold on to anything. They're so present. They're so in the moment. Whereas we ruminate on things and we attach it to all these memories and things in our childhood, even if it's subconscious. And they just don't do that. They just let it
Yes,
go.
yeah, they are so in the present moment. I tell people, I'm like, you have to go inwards and backwards. And if you take it backwards, whatever you're feeling in the moment, it probably has a couple of layers of different experiences that kind of overlap now onto each other. And that's sometimes why we feel all of this feelings when something happens. So you have to take it back. But oh my God, Sophie, I feel like I could ask you all these questions, amazing knowledge and amazing perspectives as to how to be a parent in this new world with the knowledge that human design brings to us. So tell me, how can people find you and what kind of programs are you offering for people to work with their designs in on their journey as parents?
Yeah, so my website is just myname.com, so relatively easy as long as you spell my name correctly.
Yes.
I've got a number of different things. So I've got 3 different ebooks. One is called Decoded, and it's a very introductory ebook to human design for people that have kind of never really heard of it. I've got one called Inspired, which is specifically kind of a bit more of an introduction to people, but more on the kind of education. So how human design can, again, like we said at the beginning, really help to personalize homeschooling or world schooling or unschooling. Like what kind of
Yes.
aspect of the human design chart you might look at in terms of education. They're both introductory ebooks. And then I've got one called Revealed, which is really focused on the parent. So for the parent that's a little bit longer one, to understand what their core wounds are and all of these different things and how they can start reparenting themselves. So I also do like PDF readings. So there's a permission slip reading for children, which again is kind of a general overview of their specific design. There's a shadow report for parents. Those are both PDF reports. And then in terms of one-to-one sessions, so there's kind of this ladder of things for them. One-to-one sessions, I do 60-minute one-to-one sessions on an individual basis, so looking at one chart, or I do 90-minute sessions where I'm looking at 2 or more charts, so relationship or family. I then have a course which is currently self-study, but I'm going to be doing a live version of it again in September, like a new, improved, upgraded version, and that's called Flourish. So that's a 6-week program, live program specifically for parents to understand about human design. So we go through quite a lot of aspects in that. There's also going to be things like emotional regulation. People don't need to know anything about human design for that. I've run it 3 times in the past, and some people have some knowledge of it, some people don't. I go through all of the basics, but I go into all the variables as well. So that's quite interesting for people.
Yes.
And then I also have a one-to-one container called Regulate, which is really that longer kind of, regulation that parents do. So that's usually over 3 months. And then I have a training program as well, which I will do the next round in January for people that want to learn more about human design, whether they're a coach or facilitator or healer and they want to add human design to their mix and either do readings or use it in the background like I do therapeutically as well.
My goodness, you guys, such amazing opportunities to mix this beautiful knowledge and to give you practical tips though, because honestly, that is the reason why I loved it so much, because he made my life practical. He gave me the practical tips that I needed to move forward with this, unschooling, self-directed education, world schooling, even my work as a flight attendant. It really opened up a lot of pieces. So we're going to put all of Sophie's links and resources for you to download, connect with her if you're on your parenting journey, like as a beginning parent, or if you're even thinking about having a child. I feel like this work could be so healing before we have children because you come into this new era of your life with a whole different perspective. Sophie, thank you so much. Do you have any final words of wisdom for people that are on this journey of parenting, just being a parent and a guide for our beautiful children that are coming into this world?
To give yourself a break, give yourself grace, because we're doing the best that we can with what we have now. It's not going to be perfect. I know some people, when they find out about human design, like, oh, I wish I'd had it earlier. But it's great that you found it now. So again, there's a sixth line. I'm kind of an eternal optimist, right? Let's focus on the positive things. Yes, there's been these things in your childhood, but look at these incredible tools that we have to help you along your way now to be a better parent, to then help the next generation and the next generation. So we're so lucky that we have all of these tools and things that we can dive into.
We really are.
Keep
We
going.
really
The
are.
fact that I think for a parent, the fact that you were even considering any of these things and you're thinking outside the box, just give yourself a huge pat on the back, even for doing that. And then just take it one step at a time.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, definitely one step at a time. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sophie, for being here. For everyone out there, please remember that your time is precious. I hope you're making it count. See you next time.